either scanning the QR code, or there should be, yeah, you can scan the QR code. There should be a code. Let me see if there's not a code. Let's see how technically you are today. If you're struggling, just give me a sign. Oh no, I see thumbs up, which means we're winning.
I don't see a code yet, Huba. Is there a code?
There should be a code. Let me just see, Berto. If there's not one, I'll open it on the other side. There is no code today, so it means that everybody has to scan the QR code. It's in the essence of being open and digital, and but I see people are doing well. There we go. Now you'll see the code at the top. 15184757. Do you see that now, Berto?
Yes, we see it. Thank you so much.
Good. All right. So we wanted to see how many of you in the room are from South Africa. We can see that South Africa is in the lead. That makes me as a South African extremely happy to see how well represented we are in this dialogue, as Bertie said, the 6th dialogue. And I'll run through this a little bit faster today. We'll also add some of this content to the reporting. But what is really exciting to see here is also to see the private sector. And that's something that we've discussed in a number of dialogues, which we've tagged as potentially a future dialogue. But how do we involve the private sector? And if those in the audience that are from the private sector would like to give us an idea on how we can involve more, please do drop us some ideas in the chat and we'll be happy to pick up on those. Oh, wow. Again, Berto and I put this question in because we were really curious. Because reflecting on the past dialogues, we thought that we had the same people in the room, but you are surprising us. So actually quite a few people today that are here for the first time. If you are open to it, please drop us in the chat. Why did you decide to join today? Was it because of the theme? Was it the first time that you've heard about the dialogue? Because that might also be, and that gives us an indication on how to also disseminate information on future dialogues. So I'll split that because I'll use that in the reporting as well. Does it lead to open access or knowledge for all? Nobody disagree? Anybody that disagrees with this statement? Some of the risks this morning, we've also heard about intellectual property. How does intellectual property and reflect on open science? ESCOM, yes, we do have some infrastructure challenges that also create an issue for us. Long-term investment, perhaps people have an idea, and I think this morning we also learned what are opportunities to exchange ideas. I hear somebody, and there we go. Colleagues, I hope that this Mentimeter also energizes you a little bit. Oh, I think we dropped. Just open it on this side. And gives you an idea for what is possible in linking South Africa and the Netherlands through open science and open education. Thank you very much, Berto.
Thank you very much, Huba, and very nice to see a little bit who is in the audience. From which country are you? From which body are you? From the government, an institution, something else? And how are you invited? And what are linkages that we can make? We are ready for the afternoon, I think, so we can go to our next speaker. She is Dr. Naputula Mjunu. She is Deputy Director at the NRF, and she will speak on the Open Science platform in South Africa. Go ahead.
Thank you, Berto. I think Huba should unshare.
Yes, you can also start sharing your own presentation, then it will automatically stop. Yeah, there we go.
You all see my presentation?
It's good visible in the screen. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I will apologize. I will have to do the presentation and run. I have other commitments. But thank you again, Berto and Veronica, for giving us the opportunity to present the initiative. And again, thank you everybody for pitching in. So today I had preempted some of the speakers. I'm going to try and be very short to try and keep to time as we're running over. I'm just going to present a little bit on the few slides on the initiative and then talk about something that maybe we don't talk about as much, that is both affected or maybe talks a little bit on some of the issues that were talked about earlier. Right, so I think I will start it off the slide that the ethos of the open science recommendation, of course, or the spirit of them is to make sure that everything or science is accessible, inclusive, and equitable and benefits society. So what Ariana talked about this morning as science as a public good, this is what it needs. So again, if you think of this in mind, this is what the African open science is for, is to use open science or open science resources in Africa to make sure that we outreach and engage with the researchers and make sure that we impact education and capacity development to make sure that the African scientists or the scientists in the continent are participating in all the data intensive science, making sure that they can address global African challenges and global challenges. Of course, using support on data science and AI, and of course, some of this cloud computing. So our job, or what we think we need to do, is make sure that we convene and coordinate the interests and ideas and people in all the resources for open science in and for Africa. So, of course, this is how we are trying to organize ourselves. We have appointed nodes. Currently, we have 3 in Southern, Eastern, and North Africa. We are currently going to have a call for the West African node in Central Africa. So these nodes will decide what is priority on open science and what they want to do in their region. And as a coordinating hub, we will support these activities with the research institution, university, government, and the public, with all the stakeholders involved. So besides introducing open science, I want to, AOSP, I want to talk about this issue a little bit. University rankings, especially in Africa, reinforcing the inequities that open science is trying to address, or what we've been trying to address for quite a bit. But are we not knowing or knowingly, by participating in this type of activities, reinforcing the inequities that prevail? So I've picked up a lot of chatter, of media. University rankings could be biased in funding. They could affect rankings of universities. Of course, the metrics have been shown that some of them are faulty. And of course, there are headlines that talk about the absurdity of university rankings. So I said for today, let me open up a conversation for people. I'm not an expert in this, but I think after reading a little bit and getting involved in some project, this is something we really need to think about as an academic community. So I picked up on the 2 that are mostly used, the QS World University Rankings, and then you have the High Times Education World Rankings. So if you look at them, of course, the biggest mover in the past 5 years is University of California, Berkeley. If you look there, it has quite, since 2018, it moved from about 18 to somewhere in the top 10. And then if you go to the QS one, again there, it moved from about position 27 or 30 up to this year about position 10. So what do these university rankings for this? So I have been starting to coincidentally following the Leiden University, which they have come up in the past 3 or 4 years, looked at what are the alternatives in university rankings. So again, side by side the two well-known university rankings, and then you look at the Leiden university rankings. I've tried to check there. If you take the top 10 there, of course, Harvard is in the Leiden university ranking is still right there at the top 10. But if you look at the picture, it's completely different compared to the well-known acceptable, where supposedly they know who is the best in the university world. So what makes this Leiden University ranking different from these two? How does open science or open source material make this Leiden ranking a bit more acceptable and a bit more closer to equity than other models that we've been using? The proof is not in the pudding, is in the input. So if you look at now what these other two university rankings that I talk about use mostly what we accept is the World Web of Science and Scopus. So it uses two smaller circles. But if you look at the current version of the Leiden University ranking, it uses what we call an open source called OpenAlex. So if you look at the numbers of objects in OpenAlex that are assessed compared to the other two, they are more than 10 times. Why then are we accepting something that assesses a very little by university and then gives a 7, say it can rank university? So these are the options what open science and some of the tools can offer us. So this is some of the things that Ariana, for example, readily may be missing here, but they are here. And some of the journals that are not here, they may be here. So we really need to think about how we can use open science, again, to come back to addressing what we said before, inclusivity in publication, in education, and make sure that whatever is equitable and beneficial. I will stop there for today. Thank you. And thank you again, Berto, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mjunu, for your contribution. And I think I do hear a lot of insights that I didn't know of about the Leiden University. So thank you for sharing this Dutch example and learning me about it, teaching me about it. Is there any question from the audience? I see someone mentioned in the chat a good example where you can find more information. Any questions? If not, then we continue to the next speaker. So thank you very much, Ms. Mjunu. Have a good day. And then over to Ms. Susan Veldsman. She is director of the Academy of Science of South Africa. And she's also an important player in South Africa on the topic of open education, access and science. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Bert. Just confirm if you can see my full screen and not a display mode.
I see your full screen, not yet the presenter mode.
There you go. Can you see it right now?
Not yet. But we do see your presentation. Yeah, now it is in presenter mode. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you then, chairpersons, considering you too this afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Susan Veldsman. I'm the director of the Scholarly Publishing Program at the Academy of Science of South Africa. So as you can see, we are an entity of the Department of Science and Innovation, and that sort of also directs and manage the work that we do within the Scholarly Publishing Program at the Academy of Science of South Africa. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And it sort of feels that I'm trying to bind what has been said over the course of the day, which I do appreciate. It's quite difficult to prepare your presentation, and you're almost one of the last ones to relate what you have to say. I just want us to step back a little bit and also understand that specifically a program like ours, working in sort of on a national level, in the National System of Innovation, alongside the Department of Science and Innovation, we have to look at international developments as well. We have to monitor them. We have to input where we are requested to have our input, etc. And as you can see, I think the UNESCO Open Science recommendations were really sort of a landmark in the world of open science as to how it should happen. And it really binds all the work that not only that we do, but that we do on a national, continental, and international level. It really binds it together. So the new report has just come out, the Open Science Outlook #1, which is very important. And you can go and have a look and you will see there are some South African lenses applied. There are some African lenses applied as in comparison with the rest of the world. So it is interesting to monitor sort of our progress on this open science / open access world. And I am a little bit concerned that we are not progressing, not in South Africa, not on the Africa continent in this regard. So I think we have to sharpen our efforts to give more impetus and to start just binding all the work that we're doing together to have an impact as such. Just want to also acknowledge other international open science policies, which we as an academy, being members of those organizations, also had our input in there. So we do play quite a significant role in the international world of contributing towards the direction that open science should take and the statements around it and what it should entail. But I must bring in another layer which has not been brought in up to now, and that is because we're in South Africa, we also have to pay attention to our Pan-African focuses and our continent's developments, etc., especially those through the African Union, and then, of course, our African Open Science project program, and then the SADC region body as well. Lots are happening there, and we all have to tie in together to make the open science policy world function properly and that they plug into each other and that they speak to each other as such. Just as I said, very important that we tie in and that we plug also into the African Open Science Platform. The African Open Science Platform, as you saw from the previous speaker, Dr. Mchunu, has a very strong continental focus. But now who's looking after South Africa and who's making sure that in South Africa that we pull all our forces together to advance the open science objectives as such? And that is the question that we'll have to answer. I also just want to mention, being an Academy of Science on the continent, we are also a member of the network of African academies on the African continent. We are in the process to collaborate with them to do a statement on open science, and very often we are requested also to share all the services that we provide within the scholarly publishing program, also with the rest of Africa through all the academies of sciences. And there are quite many of them, just to say how do we cooperate. I would like to highlight two specific areas where we have not really advanced sufficiently enough, and where there's perhaps a lack of collaboration and participation. And especially in these fields, one can actually see that we really need our open science policy or our framework within South Africa to start binding these sort of decentralized activities together. One of them is the Open Research Africa platform. It sort of tries to imitate the Open Research Europe platform, but it's under huge strain because this particular platform is dependent on article processing charges also, and that is the thing, we are not properly funded, not the authors, to contribute their research to a platform like this. So there are a lot of small things and quite complex things that we have to discuss around platforms like these, and how we're going to fund them, if we're going to fund them, and what are the broad rules around participating in such a platform. There has been quite an effort through Afrika-GIF, who is driven mostly by ASABIO, and they are busy with some research where they are looking at who is participating in Africa on in the preprints scenario of things. Preprints, there are many researchers participating and depositing their research into preprint servers, but there's not a good encompassing policy around that to encourage researchers to actually participate and deposit their articles into a preprint repository. Afrika-Archief is a free preprint service for African scientists. So again, there are some major efforts also out there to try and advance the depositing of preprints. You have had a flavor of this through previous speaker, my colleague from WITS. Just want to embroider a little bit more to say that currently there are 322 journals, 195 of the 322. So it's almost 2/3 of South African published journals is open access, and not all of them are diamond open access. There is a whole fruit salad of business models, article processing charges, or funding from institutions where they then can offer diamond. So those are the two sort of main business models. 51 institutional repositories. We found that institutional repositories are not very well supported through their organizations at the moment. So we have to reinvent again and re-energize the whole movement around institutional repositories. 11 open access policies, 19 dating repositories registered on RAY3 data. And this is quite concerning, is that only 2 data repositories has been assigned the core trust seal. In this world where openness are sometimes actually being questioned, it is very important that we work towards a trusted repository, trusted open services, etc. And then, of course, Mr. Imran Patel mentioned this morning, Nikas, who is starting to look at our national and presents itself as a national integrated cyber infrastructure system, very important. And South Africa is known. Yes.
It seems like your slide has not moved.
Oh, really? It has moved on my side. I wonder why. Any suggestions? I'm not sure. Let's just see. Did it move now? No.
Not yet, but maybe you can shortly stop sharing and share it again. Maybe that helps.
Okay, right. Let me quickly do that, and I do apologize for that. Can you see it right now?
On my side, I see a black screen. I think it's loading. Maybe try it once more.
Yeah, it won't advance on my side now.
Okay.
There seems to be a delay between us and you. Let's try again. Sorry about that.
No problem. It's a good example of how we can work very well together online, but are also dependent on technology.
Yes, indeed. How's that? Much better.
I don't see it yet, but maybe it's loading. So I think you can continue, and if it pops up, we see the vision as well.
So it's not yet on your side, right?
Not yet, no.
Yeah, I'm actually not too sure what to do from my side. You got it?
It's here, yeah.
Okay, right, fantastic. So now moving to South Africa to see what's happening within the southern tip of this continent. As you've heard that our open science policy has still not been approved through Parliament. And we really want to call on the DSI to push very hard for that, because there's a really urgent need for the DSI and DHET to assume and to reassume their leadership role in consolidating open science and open access initiatives. It's important because at the moment there are many initiatives, but they're all happening very decentralized without a coordinating umbrella. And we do realize that open science is a massive enterprise, and of course it will imply that radical restructuring will have to take place in the science system. But I think because there are so many projects actually going on, that we do have sort of we can jumpstart actually very quickly. I must just relay something very personal, and that is that I've been involved in the open access movement right from the beginning, 2002, 2003 in South Africa. And I became very despondent and very desperate because it just wouldn't move forward. But I must say, with all these initiatives globally and continentally and nationally, there is a far better move and a far better reason for open science, open access to succeed, because it's starting to address our socio-economic development. And it addresses also the problems that we are facing with global issues. And then, of course, the SDGs that drives this. But then again, in the context of South Africa, I think the value system that it poses to us, in which we can function, is a great plus, also to forward democracy in our country, etc. on the one hand side, but also to open up the science system as such. So that is very good news for me personally to assist. I just want to very quickly just highlight again and emphasize what is the role of the scholarly publishing program within ASIF. As said, it plays a very big role in the national system of innovation. We try and enhance the national capacity to innovate and to conduct, produce and publish research. We inform policy decision because we're an Academy of Sciences. We do scientific advice and we advise towards policy. And the scholarly program had played a significant role in the research output policy of the Department of Higher Education and Training, and also going forward with the publications quality framework. More will be expected to us to lead and to advise in this arena of things. And then, of course, the advancing and democratizing of knowledge, and then facilitating the equality and inclusion of opportunity, and then increasing the quality and the visibility of all the South African research output publications, which is very important to us, considering when we started with the program about 15 years ago, South African research was very low on global radars. And we really had to work very hard is to up the quality element of all the research output modes as such. So we have a whole spread of services that we provide not only nationally, but this translates also to benefit the continent or wherever the researcher is around the world. We present many courses on how to write for a scholarly journal, peer review. We have a code of best practice for scholarly journal publishing. We have an African Scientist Directory where you can search for African scientists. It's open, it's free to use, it's free to register. But again, it's a trusted repository because the quality control on that database is very high. And then at one point we felt, well, we start we need to start sort of showcasing what we're doing in the open science field. We have a long list of activities where we try and advance open science in South Africa. And we started with a portal where all the interesting information gets collated under the portal as such. We have an A to Z directory of all the South African journals, etc. And then, of course, Mr. Imran Patel also spoke about the CLO South Africa collection, which is very important for the system of innovation. Currently, there are just over 100 journals indexed in that portal, but not every South African journal will eventually be indexed on that portal, because only journals of quality and open accessible are indexed on that portal. Of course, we have our own South African Journal of Science, which is a diamond open access journal. It is one of the top multidisciplinary journals, not only nationally, but it's really competing and faring very well internationally as well. We have Colisa Journals, which is a platform where we host open access journals at a very, very low cost. It's just hosting. We do not interfere into the editorial processes of journals, and that proves to be very successful as well. And then we also have our own repository. And the other product that we are very proud of is the Quest magazine, where we try and open and unlock science for grade 10 to 12 learners. It's also a tool that we use during our science engagement, is to enlighten and to ignite an interest in science for these learners as such. Very important in the field of open data sharing. We have the POPIA Code of Conduct for Research, which we're trying to have accredited at the moment. Our envisaged sort of ideal would be to have it also GDPR endorsed or accredited, so that we could share data or personal it alludes to the protection of personal information of research incumbents, so that we can also be trusted in the data we share and how we share it. Of course, there's a lot of work that we have to do in Africa for the sharing of data, but it is very important for Africa to have something like this in place. Africa is really subjected to the export of their data. So research programs come into the continent, do their research, take their data and go off. And then sometimes that country does not even have access to that data. So there's a lot of work to do in that regard, is to protect also African collected data as such. Now you can see we have a whole spread of services, and also to showcase what is it that we're doing, we decided to have and for the moment I will call it an internal open science policy of the Academy, to give an umbrella under which all our services are operating, so that everybody out there can understand what is ASAP's role in open science in South Africa, and also to prevent that we do not duplicate and that we do not reinvent the wheel. You can see by all the different principles that we are addressing there. It is the typical principles that you will find in the UNESCO recommendations. It's the typical principles that has been encapsulated in the South African Open Science Policy Framework. So it's nothing opposite from what one expect to be in open science policy as such. This draft science policy, we hope, will be approved by our council next week on the 7th of February during a council meeting. And it really explains in terms of open access, what are the services that we are providing, what is it that we're supporting. And we are extending it over all these principles. And of course, the one that's always very interesting to us is open collaboration, especially through citizen science, science engagement, science communication, etc. So going forward, what has to happen? So we need to we need to move from competition to collaboration. We have to boost participatory science between scientists, but also scientists and society. We must create and we must support and we must fund open source and open access repositories with quality data and other content. Also, the erection of global curation infrastructures are important, and the role that they should play not only nationally, but also in terms of the role they could play internationally as such, and we should plug into those. And of course, very important, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that we actually produce our open science policy for South Africa to put our activities under one large umbrella and to ensure that through the multi-stakeholders, which you have already witnessed this today and this morning, that it actually makes sense in terms of what we're trying to achieve in South Africa. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your contribution. And my colleague here is actually applauding for your presentation. So thank you very much for that. And for me, it's really cool to hear that it's actually not a lack of initiatives in South Africa that is the issue, but more the national maybe coordination of all these initiatives. So that's really hopeful that there is some good improvements very possible in the near future. There's one question in the chat that I would like to share with you. There is a request for the link to all the content that you provided, and especially to the websites, I think, with the portal, for example. So if you can share it in the chat, that would be helpful. And we can also share it afterwards, of course. And then there's another question from Erika Jansen van Rensburg, and she says, you mentioned that you would like to have the open science policy approved by Parliament. And before already some comments have been supplied to the policy, but we never received feedback on the comments that we submitted. Any idea where we can find out more about this process in consultation sessions? Is that a question to you, Susan, or is it more a question to the colleagues at the government?
It is, I think, more a question to the government. I can just initially say what my perception is, or what my sort of vineyard and information is the fact that yes, I think all the comments, etc., have been considered. There's still a lot of work. We must remember how I view it. It is a framework that has been submitted to the Parliament for approval, and I think out of that still a lot of work has to happen to actually formalise the principles within the framework for policy issues, and to actually attach it to specific budgets, and of course to a time frame in which what and the priorities will be then implemented. So we must understand it is a long process. And it doesn't happen overnight, and it needs a lot of planning, and that's why I was calling for that we take strong leadership on this again through the DSI, and that we, as a multi-stakeholder intervention, that we look at what needs to be done. Yes.
Point taken. I allow one more question from Evie Kletto before we go to the next speaker, Jeroen.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, go ahead.
I am on the task team for the drafting of the open science national policy. I am even more frustrated than you are. It is apparently scheduled for submission to Cabinet, and it has been since 2021. It would be good if the Department of Science and Innovation could be approached from several different directions to encourage taking up this issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, and I'm really happy that you are looking for a constructive way and reaching out to the colleagues. So point taken, and we have colleagues from DSI, of course, in the meeting. So maybe we can have a reflection at the end of this dialogue today, where we do a wrap up and reflection. But thank you very much for pointing this out, and point taken and noted. Then it's time, I think, to go to the counterpart of NRF and ASAP on the Dutch side. For that, I will invite Mr. Jeroen Sondervan from the Dutch NWO, the Dutch Research Council. He is program leader, open scholarly communication, and he is very active in the sector of open science in the Netherlands. So Jeroen, go ahead.
Thank you, Berto. Thank you for this invitation to speak to you today. Just on the safe side, I will be sharing the link to my presentation, so you can even after the meeting can look up for maybe some more information. I will try to share the screen. Hopefully that works. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's visible and in presenter mode, so go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So thank you again. I will be talking about the recent developments with our current national initiative, Open Science NL, and I will also focus on the open access side of things today. I'm working as a program leader, Open Scholarly Communication, at the Open Science NL office, and the Open Science NL initiative is a part of, I should say, embedded in the Dutch Research Council, NWO. Slides are being shared. Also, I put it in the chat. So, if you have any questions afterwards, please contact me. I won't be dwelling too much on this slide because Gerdien Verheul from the ministry already showed it this morning. Just to show you where we come from. I guess it started all with open access and this ambition of 100% open access in 2013. And now, 10 years later, we are here with this new national 10-year program, Open Science NL, which has a team. So it was launched in March 2023, already almost a year ago. It's a 10-year program, comes with funding, as explained by Gerdien. And the team is currently existing of 9 people, so 4 program leads, a director, and we have admin staff and secretary and communications on board. So it's just about 6 months that we are as a team complete. So and now we're really getting up to speed for the next years to come. September 2023, so a few months ago, also online presence. Openscience.nl is the website. And you can find all the relevant and up-to-date information about what we are doing, what we are planning to do, and also information about how we are engaging with the larger community in the Netherlands, but also outside the Netherlands. And a thing to mention is that this is really a comprehensive program and really involves a lot of stakeholders. I've listed here all the stakeholders that are involved. So the ministry, but also all universities of applied sciences, the medical centers, supporting institutions, and data repositories. So it's a large consortium of Dutch stakeholders in higher education that are involved in this program. The work we are doing and plan to do, the guiding definition is the UNESCO recommendation on open science. This is really our guiding document, and where we are looking at. So we have just before the end of before Christmas, a few 2 months ago, we have presented our first working program. That's a 2-year working program, and after the first one, we will come again with a second one, which will have a longer outlook. As you can see, we have 4 pillars: open scholarly communication, fair data, open research software, and citizen science / societal engagement or public engagement. You have different names for this. These are our pillars, and we have the 4 program leads. I'm responsible for the open scholarly communication part, that are responsible for these pillars. And the program is built upon, let's say, another 5 layers, as you can see. So capacity building, infrastructure, robust research processes, evidence base for open science. So that's really a research-based program and funding scheme, and empowering communities. And this is just to show you. I won't be going into details if you have any questions afterwards, if you have read the working program, but this is just to show you that these 5 pillars are broken down in different action lines, and aims and goals to work on open science implementations, but also research on open science, as you can see at 4.1, for instance. And now I'm be moving to more like the open access part of things. And what for open access is very relevant in terms of action lines is the 2 I listed here: enabling and strengthening institutional publishing, and open science infrastructures, which will be a flagship funding instrument anyway, because it needs to cater for all the 4 pillars I mentioned. So open access in the Netherlands. So a very brief state of affairs. And luckily, we had Julia Trentacosti from Groningen already, who explained a lot of details about also practicalities. How are we achieving open access? This is just to show you how the policy side of it, make it required. This top-down policy in the Netherlands, all stakeholders in higher education are involved. So universities of the Netherlands, the Dutch funder NWO, the University of Applied Sciences, the Royal Academy of Sciences, all the research university libraries and the Royal Library, and the medical centers. So it's really a broad consortium of stakeholders that are involved in open access policy and trying to achieve this ambition of 100% open access. And of course, we need alignment, and we are aligning with mainly the European stakeholders, and also, as from the NWO, the Dutch funder perspective, we are a signatory of Plan S. So this really guides us in our policy. So, and this is just briefly, because Julia already explained a lot about it from an institutional perspective, but this is just to show you how we are achieving open access via different routes. And I guess especially the read and publish, the mentioned read and publish deals, so the hybrid route, and the green route, applying the Taverne Amendment, our Dutch copyright amendment, really helps us to achieve open access. And that can be seen, and this picture on the left is coming from the University of Twente. It has a similar kind of growth as for Groningen. So for 2021 and already for 2022, the figures are known, and many universities now come to this sort of 95-98% open access availability of research articles, I need to say. And on the right side, you see the recent monitor from the Dutch funder, NWO, and the medical funder, ZonMW. And there as well, you can see this 93% of research financed by both these funders has been published open access. And again, that's only for the articles, because that's the only scholarly output we are monitoring currently. So that's all fine, and that's really focused, I guess, the last 10 years, policy-wise, but also funding-wise, really on the quantity level. So really achieving this 100% open access ambition, and then mainly for articles. I guess for the next few years, and maybe within the 10-year course of the program, we need also to really look at the quality of open access, look at the innovations, and also the equity debates and issues. because we are recognizing really also in the Netherlands had the issues in open scholarly communication. So who and what is not participating. So again, I just explained that we in the last 10 years have been focusing only and solely on the peer-reviewed articles. So there's still a primary focus on these kinds of outputs. The other thing is that we see with the read and publish deals the so-called transformative agreements, which are not really transformative, and which are really becoming more expensive, and which are also very exclusive. Still, the for-profit publishing is in the lead, and this is really a big concern. And also, and it has been mentioned in the previous talks, this growing consensus that the APC model is really not sustainable for the long term, and it really leads to inequalities between rich and poor authors, also within even within the Netherlands, institutions, countries, and global regions. And another thing which is, I think, important is that the domestic non-English languages are really squeezed out in our publishing practices and publishing behaviors. And that's something to take into account. And then the other thing, I call it beyond open access. How we have a large pile of now openly available research papers, but what would be the next step? How to engage with the citizens and practitioners? How can they make use of this huge pile of available material? What do we need to really achieve that research will become available in a good way for all these different stakeholders in society? So what we see in the Netherlands is that the state of affairs is really based still, these publishing models is really still based on ownership. The publishers or service providers, they consider themselves as the market. They offer different services, usually high priced still, to the academic world. And this is really based on exclusion, lack of control, and even IP and data exploitation. And what I like to see, and what we like to see in the near future, is that we really move to models based on services and really taking back control and ownership. And that this open science, open academic community in the Netherlands is serviced by publishers or third parties, but really based on our values and principles for open science. And that it's digital sovereign, and that it is also it comes with fair and transparent pricing. And this really relates, of course, also to what Planas is endorsing. So, but the good news is that there is really a growing intention, and we have been hearing about Ariana's work in South America, where it's already 30 years happening. But there's really a growing attention and investments in this non-APC publishing models, Diamond Open Access, but also open publishing infrastructures in the Netherlands. So we see a growth of the so-called new university presses, fully open access publishing units at institutions, and also national infrastructure to support Diamond Open Access journals. And there's also a growing attention that we need to really look at other publishing practices. Preprints were mentioned in a previous talk. Open peer review, these kinds of practices need to be looked at and need to be supported and stimulated in the near future. This is just to show you the national platform, openjournals.nl. It's 3 years old. It was funded initially by the NWO as a funder, and it received the second round of funding from the Open Science NL last year for the next 5 years. And it hosts now 32 fully Diamond open access journals, and it will grow in the next few years to a lot more. And we really, I guess, backed up by this recent council conclusions in 2023, the European Union Council conclusions that call for transparent, equitable, and open access to scholarly publications. And this really helps us to, I would say, contextualize these efforts in the coming years. So just briefly, moving forward, and I think it's really about making connections. Also, not taking open access just as a pillar, but really look at how to contextualize open access, as I call it. So this is what, for me, one piece of the puzzle, which means for me that open access had to just strategically connect open access publishing with different open science practices and also principles and values. And I've been using this also in my previous job at Utrecht University, where I was involved in the open science program at Utrecht University and engaging with researchers about this. So asking these questions, where do I publish? Which really relates to, and we haven't been touching upon on recognition and rewards this morning fully, I think, but really relates to this recognition and awards questions and foreseen transformations, but also the public and societal engagement. Do I need to publish in a peer-reviewed academic closed access journal, or do I have other venues at hand? What do I publish? So how does it connect, or how can we make sure that the data and the software and code are available? So research is becoming more reproducible, for instance. How often do I publish? Do I need to publish another reviewed article, or can someone or can something else also be rewarded and highly rewarded, like, for instance, a public engagement activity, making a podcast, or making my open educational resource material available? And how do I publish open science? This relates to the different open science and open access open science practices, publishing practices, like preprints, registered reports, and fully open licensed. And last but not least, I think, how can I publish openly? We really need, and this connects to the open education discussion, we really need to educate students, BA, MA, but also PhD on PhD level, these open science skills. And for instance, Utrecht University is really, and I know that Delft is also working on this. Delft University, my colleague next will talk about this. Really work on educational programs and to enhance open science skills. I will skip this one. Another piece of the puzzle, which is, I think, really important, communities. So make it normative to publish open access and to practice open science. And what we've seen is that in the Netherlands, it started with Utrecht, with the Open Science Community Utrecht. In the middle, the yellow dot, started a bottom-up community of researchers, getting to know each other, learning about their open science practices, and really share knowledge and expertise on different levels of open science. And now, currently, all research universities in the Netherlands have such an open science community. And we recently, from the Open Science NL program, funded all these communities with 100K budget each, to really help them and to support them in their work, also in the coming years. And this is really, I think, the glue between, let's say, mandates and policy and ambition and practice. You need the communities to really foster these practices. And last but not least, concluding remarks is, I think, another piece of the puzzle, which is maybe the most important one, is incentivizing open science and really make it rewarding. And just to give you two examples, what is happening in the Netherlands currently is that on the left side we have a national project, and again, all Dutch research stakeholders are involved. Room for Everyone's Talent started in 2019. And it's about really towards a new balance, as the subtitle is going, in the recognition of rewards of academia. So it's really about transformations, the needed transformations in recognition and rewards. And open science and open science practices is a fundamental part and pillar of that project. to really stimulate open science and also to make sure that it is being rewarded and recognized within the institutions, and also within the NWO, the funder perspective. And on the right side, this is the strategy evaluation protocol. So that's basically the guideline how to assess research and research teams and departments, and there too, open science is a fundamental part of this evaluation protocol, which, as you can see, lasts until 2027. So it's now being practiced, and it would be really good to learn from that, also for myself, how that works and how that is going to work in the next few years. So with that, I want to thank you. I hopefully briefly highlighted the things we do at Open and will be doing at Open Science NL. On the left side, my contact address. If you have any questions afterwards, please contact me, and I'm happy to share any information or expertise needed. So with that, thank you, and I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jeroen Zondervan from NWO in the Netherlands. First of all, congratulations with all the progress made. Very impressive. And it's very good and nice to see that there is a clear top-down approach, but also a lot of bottom-up approaches are popping up and actually are aligning in your program. And it actually made me realize how big this change is to open education, access, and science. So we have, of course, the commitment of the government as a necessary basis to make it happen on a national scale. But we do need all the individuals at the different institutions to make work of this. And then a partner like you, NWO, as a big platform in the Netherlands, can really assist in facilitating not only the top-down information sharing and making it much more concrete, because you shared a lot of concrete guidelines, I must say, and then also align that with the bottom-up approaches. So impressive to see. I think similar to the South African side, it's really great to see so much initiatives on this, and it also showcases how difficult a culture change actually is. So we need a lot of attention for this. Is there any question from the audience? I don't see any hands. I do see a supplement from Michiel. He will be speaking a little bit later, so you can read it in the chat. I won't read it out loud now. But let us go to the next speaker, one of the enablers on the African side, from Siavula, Dr. Mark Horne. He's Director for Learning and Impact at Siavula, and he will share his approach on the African context.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to just quickly share some slides and then ask someone to confirm that, as we always have to do, that they're coming through appropriately. Are you able to see that?
Yes, it's visible.
Perfect.
You can put it in presenter, and then yes.
Right. Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and it's been interesting to listen to the talks. I haven't been able to listen to all of them, and I feel a little bit like preaching to the converted or the choir here, in a sense. So I think a lot of what I'm going to talk about will be very well known to people in the audience, but I'm hoping to bring a South African basic education perspective to it very specifically. So I'll speak about my context. So my name is Mark Horne. I'm the Director for Impact and Learning at the Siavula Foundation. Maybe for our international participants, Siavula means we are opening. So it's nice in this forum on open education, open access, and open science. Siavula means we're opening, and we've been a high school education focused project for a long time, with a focus on open educational resources initially. And I just want to talk about some of our actual experiences from the basic education sector in South Africa, and some of the things that seem abundantly clear and obvious, and I'm going to hint at how I think it might be that these pieces can be put together in a way that really has a lasting and systemic impact on education in the basic education sector. I know that this is not really a basic education sector focused discussion and forum, but I think that there's an important interplay between the higher education sector and the basic education sector on this. I have got a few definitions in my slides, but I realize there's absolutely no point. I think everything's been covered. So I think I'll save you some time. But I don't think I need to explain what open educational resources are. But when I work with teachers, I just like to summarize open copyright licenses as licenses that grant freedoms rather than imposing restrictions. The lawyers are probably having heart palpitations at that, but it works for teachers. And I think everybody will be familiar with the rights and that are provided by many OER licenses. And I'll pin my colors to the mast that I'm a fan of kind of by attribution type licensing. So CC BY licensing in the context of, say, making open educational resources like textbooks and things like that, so that we maximize what can be done and what opportunities the licenses allow for when added to educational resources. And at Siavula, we developed a set of open educational resources. Siavula, that's why it's called Siavula. It was all about open educational resources initially. And the focus was to start on content for grades 10 to 12 for mathematics and physical sciences in South Africa. Over the years, we've actually had the opportunity with different funders to work on other subject areas. So natural sciences grades 4 to 6, natural sciences grades 7 to 9, and then the mathematics and physical sciences grades 10 to 12. And our focus has been trying to collaboratively develop the resources, release them under a CC BY license, but develop our own kind of XML-based publishing pipeline so that we can work with a funder and in partnership with the Department of Basic Education. And all of the resources that we have produced have been reviewed and endorsed by the Department of Basic Education. And by kind of building our own publishing pipelines, we're able to produce a lot of different outputs, from print PDF files, very high resolution PDF files for print purposes, to kind of lower resolution PDF files for consumption on the device. Starting off with a kind of XML-based format, we can also produce an HTML4 version that caters for feature phones. So still really very relevant in an African context are phones that don't have a web browser that supports JavaScript on them, but they are WAP enabled. So a lot of content can still be consumed like that. So that's our HTML4 version. HTML4 and JavaScript do go hand in hand, but our HTML4 version is not responsive and it has no JavaScript. And then we can make an HTML5 version, which you can then just package as an EPUB 3. So essentially, you're producing a traditional textbook under an open license and putting it out into a whole bunch of different formats if one leverages the open source tools that exist, the open standards that exist, etc. And we've done that. And in terms of the kind of impact and kind of learning opportunity in schools, it doesn't really make much of a difference whether the content was consumed as an EPUB. I'm talking about traditional textbook content or print, etc. But what is significant is that we can now produce and distribute this content that's under an open license in a way that learners can consume it via many different channels, and that makes it far more accessible. In addition, in the partnership with the Department of Basic Education, our development of open educational resources was funded by typically a corporate foundation. So I think most significant ones that we've worked with include sort of Vodacom Foundation in South Africa, Old Mutual, organizations like that, in terms of the textbook production. For the lower grades, we did a lot of work with the Sasol and Zalo Foundation, which no longer exists, but has been reabsorbed into the Sasol Foundation. But really focusing on just making the content as accessible as possible. But with the cost recovery for the production of the resource from a philanthropic source, and covering only the cost of production, so there's no royalties then associated with it. When the Department of Basic Education printed our resources, they reduce the cost of printing and distribution by as much as 80%. So that is not the primary benefit of open educational resources, and I think it's one of the problems, in a sense, that I'd like to highlight is the focus on cost saving. However, that is a significant cost reduction, and when you've got an education sector that is struggling to provide the necessary resources in all contexts, then freeing up resources through this kind of cost reduction allows you to reallocate them elsewhere, which can hopefully have then kind of knock-on benefits. So at Siavula, we developed these resources between 2012 and 2014, and our grade 10 to 12 content was printed and distributed to all government schools in the country. So it's about 5,000 high schools would have received printed textbooks that were under an open license. And what we were able to do then is actually host the textbooks on our website. And so we've been doing that since 2012, just hosting them on a website where they can be read completely anonymously. And what's really interesting is to see that by making sure that the content is developed using proper open standards in a very clean way and openly accessible, we're able to actually draw 50% of all the learners in South Africa to reading the books online on the website during the course of a year. So we have over 1 million learners, actually 1.5 million learners every year who 95% of them on a smartphone, or sorry, on a mobile phone, are reading their maths or physical sciences, that's physics and chemistry textbooks, off the website on a phone, and typically they're on the website for 25 minutes at a time. So these are teenagers reading maths, chemistry, or physics content on a phone for 25 minutes at a time. This is remarkable. They do not want to be doing this. But it also speaks to the need, the fact that it's difficult to get textbooks, where there's textbook shortages. What do students do? And textbooks are heavy. If you walk a long way in a rural area to get to school for a few hours, carrying textbooks, if you're allowed to take them home, it's a real burden. But mobile phone penetration is very high in South Africa, and we happen to be in a very fortunate position where the Siavula platform has been 0 rated on a number of our largest mobile networks, including Vodacom, MTN, and Telkom. And we've actually seen that over 70% of our readership is leveraging a 0 rating by inadvertently turning it off, changing our IP address at some point by mistake, and losing 70% of our traffic instantaneously. So we know that learners are leveraging the 0 rating. We know that they primarily come to the website through Google search results. There's no advertising. There's nothing like that. I attribute that success to actually just very clean markup and proper semantic markup of your content can be properly indexed by search engines. Rather than trying to manipulate search engines with thousands of search terms, we actually embed 0 search engine specific terms in our web pages. We just submit a sitemap and our content is properly and cleanly marked up and 0 rated. And so it draws a lot of traffic then through search results. What's also interesting in the graph on the left at the bottom, what you see is green bars and blue bars, and the bins at the bottom, the labels are just sample phones. A phone has a score called an Antutu score, which is essentially tells you about the power of the device. It's got to do with the CPU, the RAM, etc. So it's kind of a consolidated basket measure for the power of a phone. And so these are industry standard buckets for phones, and the blue bars show our distribution. The scale is slightly off, unfortunately, but the green bars show the distribution according to the mobile networks in terms of the devices that they sell. If you scale the blue bars down a little bit so that the axes actually do line up, you'll see that the devices reading the Siavula website, that as broken down by across the devices in the market in terms of their power, represent the industry distribution. So the green distribution is which devices are being sold by the mobile networks, and the blue distribution is the devices that are actually reading our platform. And so what we see is that we've got a representative sample of devices reading textbooks on the website, mobile phones. So that's really exciting. So the zero rating plays a massive role. It's a hint that we are getting to a representative sample of the country that have access to phones. And on the right-hand side at the top, you see a heat map where along the horizontal axis, it's the weeks of the year. Blue weeks are teaching weeks, red weeks are exam weeks, and green weeks are holidays. And on the vertical axis, it's just chapter numbers in the grade 10 mathematics textbook. A curious fact about the South African curriculum is that the sequencing in which content is to be taught is mandated. And so all teachers will teach at the same order. And at government schools, there's a pace setter which says when content should be taught. So there's little orange squares that represents when that chapter is supposed to be taught according to the national pace setter. And so there's a very strong correlation between when content is supposed to be taught and which content is being read. This is just anonymous textbook traffic. And so, over 50% of South Africans on phones that represent those with phones are accessing content on the website for 25 minutes at a time in a way that supports core curriculum delivery. You can see the vertical bands around the exam weeks, the red, where the red weeks are colored in, and that's just revision for exams. But otherwise, most of the bands are linked to what should be core curriculum delivery. Some of the hotspots that are outliers are actually known deviations from the teaching plan that have been implemented in certain provinces. So you actually can get quite a lot of really interesting information from just this very high level plot. But my point being that in South Africa, OERs have been written, deployed, and made available using open standards, open tools, open source software, and under a very permissive license. And they're actually leveraged at a massive scale and in support of core curriculum delivery in the basic education sector, which is really exciting. It kind of speaks to the opportunity that they represent. There definitely are not OERs available for everything. And we chose to host these textbooks on our website in a way that allows them to be read properly. But there are many other resources that are not hosted in a similar fashion. And the primary driver for the Department of Basic Education at the time, I think, was to the cost reduction. So not the fact that they are OER. That isn't leveraged. The fact that they could be remixed, adapted, changed, contextualized, etc. But OERs present a really exciting opportunity, I think, for decreasing the cost of innovation in the education sector. So our textbooks have been taken by other organizations. They have become the basis on which apps have been built. You can take an HTML book and package it and turn it into an app, and then you can start to layer on additional functionality. So we've seen other organizations do that. We've seen universities who are doing teacher training take our textbooks and leverage them to develop notes and course material. So they layer on the teacher professional development around the sections and say, this is what you would have in your textbook. So what is the relevant content and what do you need to know, etc. And then we've seen, yes.
2 more minutes for you.
Oh, sure. Okay. And we've seen them translated. So I get carried away. My open access case study is a really nice one where I just highlighted a paper from a local journal where it's about using an open educational resource that's the PhET simulation. So a group out of Boulder, Colorado, doing really research-driven simulations that are open source software. They're educational resources, and proving that the paper proves that they had a really positive impact in the grade 8 natural science context. And so that's really exciting. And they can be translated, and there's an education community around that. But this paper is not readily accessed by teachers in a South African context. I think we've discussed open pedagogy, so you had that. So I could just go and say that I think that the OER combined with the open access should be leading to continuously improving and adapting educational practices in our context, but it's not. And the blind spots that we've got, and I think people were mentioning things that are like this, but in other sectors, is the focus on cost reduction and for OERs is a bit of a blind spot, actually. And in our context in South Africa, higher education institutions with both faculty expertise and educational expertise have not been involved in the development of OERs, and that's really sad. A lot of OERs are still, a lot of research and education is still not open access, and certainly not in a way that teachers can access those resources on a regular basis. So we do not see that research outputs about best practices in education manifest in a way that teachers are reading them and accessing them on a regular basis. And that's a real tragedy. And therefore, the change in educational practices is restricted to the very slow rollout of kind of traditional professional development. There is an opportunity that higher educational institutions could be part of the continuous adoption of OERs, because the cost, once the initial OER has been created, it's about adaptations, tweaks, enhancements. So the cost of continuous improvement is reduced substantially, and we can make them accessible digitally. We know that there's a lot of really useful research that needs to be more available to teachers that they can adapt into their practices, and that would lead to proper open pedagogies happening in our context. So I guess I like the example from the United States where a consortium of funders in partnership with the government developed the illustrative mathematics OER content, and it went out for a competitive tender. Traditional publishers participated, but the content was released under a CC BY license, which has allowed other organizations to build services around it. Even traditional publishers who do then professional development, build it into apps and things like that. So you've got a sustainability model for the traditional publishing sector to build a real ecosystem around it. But the government funding is going into OERs. The research is being fed directly back into those OERs. And I think that's where we really need to be. And we don't have the policy framework in South Africa for that. We don't have a proper policy framework for the kind of delivery and continuous improvement in a properly researched manner for OERs in the education sector. And you can always stick in the citizen cyber science stuff, which is really amazing, and I love it, but I'm over time already. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for this very informative, but also very inspiring example. And I think you've shown that even looking over the boundaries of TVET and higher education to more the primary and secondary side, there are still a lot of examples that we can learn from work that has been done in those sectors, and can also benefit a lot for the TVET and the university sector. So thanks a lot. There are some replies in the chat. You might have a look at it. And I would like to offer the possibility for a question from the audience, if there's any. Don't see any hands yet. So thank you very much, Mark. And let's go to our next speaker, who actually will help us a bit to summarize all of the things that we've discussed. Because Michiel de Jong, he's the coordinator and also project lead open education at the Technical University of Delft, and he is working there in the library. But he will actually explain the approach from the TU Delft, Technical University of Delft, around open education, access and science. They approach it already for a long time in a combined approach, which gives a lot of extra insights besides having the separate discussions. So Michiel de Jong, please feel free and go ahead.
Thank you very much, Berto. Very pleased to be here and glad that I'm able to share some of the things that we do at TU Delft today. So let me start by sharing my screen. Please give me a shout out if it works. It should be this one right here. Can you all see my presentation in presenter mode now?
Yes, it's visible. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much. So, like Berto said, my name is Michiel de Jong. I'm the coordinator for open education at the Delft University of Technology, or in short, the TU Delft. What I will be discussing with you today is how, as a university, from an institutional point of view, we approach the concept of open education, also in relation to open science. I think we've had a lot of discussions on the national, on policy implementation and policy writing on the national level. But I think it's also important to highlight what institutions, or how institutions work with this input that comes from the national level. So you could say more from the bottom up. I am very proud to represent a university that in my perception is one of the is on the forefront of this of these developments, specifically around open education, and has been for a couple of years. So I hope that my presentation will also reflect that today. Yeah, so what you see on the right here is the beautiful building of the TU Delft Library. This is one of the most iconic buildings that we have on campus, which brings me to some numbers about the Delft University of Technology. It was founded in 1842. It's the largest engineering university in the Netherlands with 26,000 students and 3,600 academic staff. The TU Delft is also a pioneer in open courseware, something that started in 2007, right after MIT started sharing all of their open courseware, all of their courseware openly on their platform. And these days we now have more than 250 courses online with open courseware shared in the form of videos, presentations, and all other kinds of educational resources. And the TU Delft has also been the host of the Open Education Global Conference in 2018, and also for the digital conference during the pandemic in 2020. So yeah, that was a bit of background. So what I wanted to talk to you now is open education at TU Delft. What does this mean for us, and how has this also how has this also developed over the years? So the initial value proposition for open education is quite big. There's quite a lot of reasons to do this, and maybe I'm also preaching to the choir here, but you could argue that sharing content openly, creating open content, using someone else's expertise content that you find in an open environment and using it in your own learning space leads to equitable learning. So making sure that all students can experience the same learning process, or the same have the same learning experience, because they have a constant access to the same kind of teaching materials. So it doesn't become, let's say, a pay-to-win model to study. Knowledge sharing, of course, as TU Delft, as a university of technology, we develop a lot of knowledge in the technological and engineering space. So we have a responsibility to society as an institution to also share this knowledge. This in turn can foster collaboration. So by being transparent about what you do and showcasing it and inviting others to join, you start up collaborations, and you can do that quite effectively by sharing and collaborating on the content that you use. It's about management and organization of educational resources. So if you start collaborating on all these things, if you start sharing knowledge and also bringing knowledge from outside in, it becomes increasingly important to manage all of that, to make sure that your digital infrastructure is in place, but also that you can help your staff and your students to find all the information that they need in the right places. It's also potentially a recognition for expertise. So if our teaching staff creates excellent educational resources, that should also reflect their expertise. And that is something that we also want to reward, or that we feel like is important to reward. Otherwise, it might become let's say, a hobby project instead of something that the university really feels is essential to our practice. Yeah, and finally, with everything like this in place, this could really be the basis for transformative teaching practices. These transformative teaching practices are quite well summarized under the umbrella of an open pedagogy. Yeah, so what I wanted to go through with you today is how we as the TU Delft started from, let's say, a pilot stage with just an idea, with the value proposition, and went to something where we feel now that this is let's say, an institution-wide innovation that we have adapted and that we work on right now. And this has taken a number of years, and this is essentially a transformative process for the entire institution. As any transformative process goes, you start at the pilot stage. So with these value propositions have at the start always been conceptual. So the first step that we needed to take when we decided, hey, we see this potential value, we need to find people to test for us and to acknowledge if this value is actually there. One of the most effective ways to do that is to go around campus, to talk to faculty, to teachers, to students, to identify the pain. So where does someone feel the limitations of the way they teach because in this case, their educational material is not in order, or their educational resources do not fit how they want to teach, what they want to teach. Once you find a couple of these people that are really intent to do something about this, who feel frustrated, who feel this pain, who want to do something about this, then you go from creating awareness with these people to helping them form their intent into action and use that to create the first initiatives. So that is what we did as well after we started putting open courseware content online. We also started looking at people who wanted to share their teaching content personally as well. I started creating the first initiative. So what came out of this pilot stage was what we started at TU Delft as open textbook publishing. This is something that we started in 2018 by facilitating our faculty in publishing their work as educational literature. And this was very interesting because, like I mentioned, we were at the pilot stage. So we did not have a university publishing service. We just had people with the interest of publishing their work as a book. So what we needed to do as a library in this case, together with these authors or with this faculty, was mapping out the publishing process. We told them, hey, we want to make your book happen, but we need to figure out everything. We want to be a party that facilitates you in sharing your work openly, but this will be an adventure that we take together. And once we had that whole process mapped out, understood what we needed to do, we needed to find a platform to publish these books on. And once these books are there, monitor the use and the reuse of these books. Because essentially, you can publish anything you want openly, but the only real value is in the use and reuse of something, right? Otherwise, you can just throw anything online. So something starts making impact and something starts to become important as soon as others also recognize the value of it and want to work with it. This initial pilot stage and these results from our pilot stage led to our executive board of our university to recognize that, hey, open education is something that should be taken up by all stakeholders, by everyone within the university. So in 2020, the university decided to put open education as one of the main program pillars of the TU Delft Open Science program. So the TU Delft Open Science program was a program designed to facilitate the publication of, or facilitate the sharing and the publication of open content across all content types at TU Delft. So we talk about open access research publications, open monographs, fair data, fair software, even open hardware. And as you can see on the far left here, open education became one of the main program pillars here. And with open education and all these other program pillars, we also had themes going through this. So rewarding and recognition, fruitful collaboration with third parties, skills for open science and ethics and research integrity. So now we went from a stage where we were just helping a single person that says, hey, I have this issue, I want to do something with this, I want to make my teaching easier, to, hey, let's use these few examples to now create something that is valuable to the entire university. But how do you grow a pilot? How do you grow a small initiative into something that adheres to everyone? Well, that is when we realized that we were in need of a institutional policy on what to do with publishing our teaching materials. So in 2022, we started working on creating the Open Educational Resources Policy for the TU Delft. So this is a institutional policy that describes, or that describes all everyone that has to do something with the publication of open educational resources within the university. It also determines who actually owns open material that is published, and who is responsible for the intellectual property in these materials. It also establishes the preferred licenses that we use. So if someone wants to publish it openly, what do we as a university consider as open? And it also acknowledges the need to build a technical and support infrastructure to help anyone who wants to do something with this. And this Open Educational Resources Policy became a reality in 2023. On the down on the right side of this slide, you can also see the link, but I'll share all the links to everything that I'm showing to you today in the chat in a while. But here we learned that yes, you can create a policy. The executive board can sign something like this, but to make a policy relevant, you need a necessity to enact it, right? So we are having a lot of discussions today about the importance of policy, but policy is a boundary condition to a boundary condition that you would need to act. But people are not automatically acting based on policy. Open educational resources policy does not magically make open educational resources appear. So the next step that we did in our program was working on creating a critical mass. So making sure that really everyone is starting to adhere to these open educational resource principles and these open education practices. So what we did, we started a grassroots funding initiative called the Open Education Stimulation Fund. What was key here is that our faculty could apply for a 1-year funding of upwards to 20,000 euros. And a faculty specifically needed to become project leader for these innovative projects. These projects could either be about publishing specific new kind of open educational resources that really focus on reusability, or transformative open education practices that focus on adopting and reusing open educational resources. And we put this call out. We got 25 project proposals, of which we were able to fund 11 because they were deemed good enough by our review board. And these projects have really given us a lot of insights in how our faculty perceives open education and how they feel open education could facilitate the needs that they have. So now that we had experience with creating resources, good resources, big OERs like textbooks, we had a policy that says, well, if you want to create something, this is how we as university feel you should do it. And now we were working on creating or finding a lot of people to adhere to all these principles. So that is an amazing next step that we got. And the stimulation fund, we have actually run it for the second time. Late last year, we got 13 new projects. So we still see a lot of growth in how many people are adhering to what open education means. This is also, of course, the critical thing to consider here is that we provide a startup fund. So we provide people with also a financial incentive to get this started. And that seems to be essential to go from a nice hobby project to really something that people feel, hey, if I do this, my university thinks this is a very important thing. That brings us to the future. The program, as you might have seen, has ended by the end of 2023. So we're now in a transformation stage. That means that, the current program has shown that the need and the value of open educational resources and open education practices is recognized. We see that a lot of our faculty are adhering to this, working on this, they're reaching out to us, and we feel that we are close to a critical mass. But that also brings us to a next issue, is that we feel that we as a library, the university library has done a lot to facilitate and coordinate all of this, but we can't do it as a library ourselves anymore. So this is, we now see that in order to grow this further, to make teaching with open educational resources a standardized practice within our teaching programs, the entire organization needs to adapt and transform. That is something that we have molded into a new program, which is really a transformation program, which is called Open Science Next. Open Science Next contains projects for open hardware, open scholarly communication, fair data and software, and civic engagement. But what is much more, what is very important to our context as well, is that we have put open education really centralized within our program, which means that it is now consisting of 3 very important pillars called open educational resources. So enabling people to create, adopt, reuse, and publish open educational resources. Open systems, which is really about making sure that the entire technical infrastructure, so all the platforms, all the systems, the digital learning environments are all designed as such that open sharing becomes a possibility. And then finally, the open pedagogy to also include the transformative learning experience, to include digital literacy and being able to critically assess open information for students and for teachers as well. And the transformations that are happening are on the vision and strategy level, on the policy level. So we need to go beyond just saying, hey, this is how resources should be published, but also this is how we see education changing in the future. We need to still work on people and culture, right? We need to take all the teachers and the students along on this journey every step of the way. The organization needs to be prepared for all these changes. And finally, the information technology stands for the technical systems that I just mentioned. This is to conclude our journey. So summarizing, we started at the pilot stage where we were identifying the pains and the value of teaching with open educational resources, showcasing open education as a solution to all these pains that were experienced. Our first pilots led to the need for being included in an open science program, where we could formalize everything that we've been doing up to then into a policy, and then using that policy to create a critical mass of users. Now that we're there, or at that point, we are at a transformation stage where the next program focuses on changing all the aspects of the organization. I really hope that this story and also this way of working towards a change, an institutional change over the years, can be a blueprint for other institutions. And I'm very happy to share our experiences in more detail to anyone who's interested. That also concludes my story. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michiel de Jong. And if you are ever thinking of making a career change, you could also think of being a cultural change leader. So I think you've shown a great deal there that this is all about a cultural change, and you've actually made it very concrete for us how to do it and how to make it possible and how to create the substantial mass that you need to make this a reality. I see that people were hanging on your lips. You have really bound the people to the session, so that's really great to see. There's still many people with us, although we are a little bit over the scheduled time, so I'm really happy with that. Is there any question from the audience? I don't see any hands or questions, so once more, there's a question from Jan Stein. Go ahead. Johan, if you already started speaking, you're muted in that case. I don't hear you yet.
I think we lost Johan, but if he's still here, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat as well. I'll stick around to answer questions in the meantime. So.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michiel.
Yep.
With that, I think we can conclude all the contributions of the speakers with a huge thank you to all of the contributors and speakers and presenters of today. And it brings us to the last part of today's dialogue, a small reflection from the partners here at the table, Veronica Moapaloa from the Department of Science and Innovation. And I will conclude and reflect a little bit after it. We've agreed that I turn off the camera to make it a bit easier for my colleague to say what she has to say. And then I'll turn the camera on, we'll do my reflection, and then we are done for today. But let me turn off the camera first, and then we listen to my colleague from Department of Science and Innovation.
Thank you so much, Berto, and thank you for to everyone who made it to this policy dialogue. It has been a very interesting topic. The amount of work that is going out there is very impressive. The first time I heard about open science, the first time I got to understand what open science is, we had Dr. Mkuno at one of our events to explain to us what open science was all about, and what the National Research Foundation was doing, to promote open science, especially in the academia. The eye was very bowled over by the amount of work that is going on in government. There's apparently, so much that is going on, to put systems and policies and legislation to promote open education, open science, and achieve open access, between South Africa and the Netherlands. There is really so much to learn from each other, and I'm excited at the level of interest this dialogue has received from the stakeholders out there. I was also excited to learn in Mexico about, the constitutional rights, that open science is a constitutional right in that country. I was also very much excited at the efforts by the Department of Higher Education through the National Open Learning Resource. Another point that I wanted to make is that there is a need for a multilateral approach to promote open science in both our societies. That cannot be overemphasized. I also realized that we needed to have a voice from the African, multilateral level, perspective, on our policy, on what, how we can work together on a multilateral level, to promote open access, open science, open education. Nevertheless, this dialogue has opened the doors for both countries to work together and learn from each other on how to ensure an increased benefit to society, both at academic and general public, especially in terms of open, education resource. On a personal level, I was just wondering how we can work together, to promote open access, open science, and open education to improve, socio-economic conditions, especially in a country, like South Africa, and maybe particularly in Africa as a whole. That there are so many disparities in South Africa, in Africa in general. How can we use this concept to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals? How to improve equality in education, especially in Africa, as I've said. From now on, I can imagine that both countries, on a bilateral level, this is what we do. We we bring people together, we bring experts together to talk about common, common areas of, collaboration, of mutual interest. I mean, bilaterally, our common goal is to improve the living conditions, especially using science. That's all that I had to say for now, and I'm really excited, and I would like maybe to see from here what we can talk later about how we can bring people together, or in networks to. I mean, we are having a joint committee commission in a few weeks. Where we are also going to discuss collaboration in open science. Perhaps, I mean, through you, Berto, we can have the stakeholders, coming together again, and to learn from each other. Thank you so much, colleagues. That's all from my side.
Thank you so much, my dear colleague, Ms. Veronica Maupoloa from the Department for Science and Innovation. I think you've spoken very eloquently. So a compliment for the wise words and also the very nice summary with a personal touch. I think I fully agree that today's dialogue was very relevant in bringing stakeholders in both countries together. And I've heard a lot about the clear vision that both countries have for open education, science, and access, actually underpinned and underlined by the collaboration multilateral already in the UNESCO partnership that we have as many countries around the globe in striving to build the science and academic sector education as a way also of peacekeeping and peace building, which is a great deal in the world. And I think what we have discussed today, maybe we had a lot of people already preaching for their own parochial here, because we are all convinced of this. We are all very much into open education, access, and science. But still, I've learned a lot and had a very much new insights and I've discovered actually new corners of the discussion around open education, access, and science. And what I've heard today a lot was also the need and the want for having communities to discuss this, and that was also stated by my colleague. And I think this is something to explore with you, people in the audience, people in both countries. I think this dialogue was a great start, and we can definitely think of a follow-up in smaller groups. We can have smaller settings and meetings where we find potential projects together. And I think this really underpins the strong ties that we already had. But today was a good example of how it can look like and what we can exchange and learn from each other. And there's really a lot going on both sides, a lot of expertise. So in that sense, there is already open access and open science taking place. And if only we could make it a bit faster, then we could be really change leaders altogether. I think that's it for now from our side. And a last big thank you to all of you in the audience for sticking with us till the end, being present, sharing your thoughts and ideas with us, to the presenters for preparing and thinking of how to contribute to this conversation. I hope it's not the end, but I'm sure if I look at the chat that there will be many more links that will come out of this today. And that makes me really happy and really proud of us. And for now, a big thank you to the Department of Science and Innovation, the Department for Higher Education and Training in South Africa, but also the Ministry for Education, Culture and Science in the Netherlands, and all the relevant stakeholders in that sectors. We can't do it alone. We have to do it together. And that's, I think, what makes us strong together. So let us grow together. And for now, I would say a big thank you. Have a good day and have a small rest after this. Thank you so much.
you.